Well, Jayden, I'll tell you what, I appreciate you coming down. Okay, I know this is probably the last place you want to be, like I told you over at the hospital. Is what I want to do is just set up a timeline, okay? Kind of ask you what happened, everything like that. Then we'll get you back to the hospital, okay? Because of your age, we need to have your mother here, okay? And I kind of let her know on the way up. Anytime that I have somebody here in the station and I'm talking to them about a case, I read what's called their Miranda warnings, okay?
There's this 17-year-old named Jayden Straight, and now he's in jail serving his 100-year term because of what happened to his 8-month-old daughter, Raja. Jayden got charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment. The charges were serious because of the horrible injuries Raja had. She had broken ribs, her skull got fractured in several places, her spleen burst, and her eyes had really bad bleeding. It's a tragic and heartbreaking situation that has shaken everyone involved.
So when you went to go check on her today in the car seat, did you notice anything wrong with her other than being limp?
No, I didn't think nothing was wrong with her. Literally, I just...
And was she breathing? And yeah, I know you mentioned at the hospital.
Yeah, like she was making
talk a little bit. Was she able to?
No, she don't talk.
Not like talk, but like
moving mouth.
Yeah, was she doing that?
Like, yeah, she was like taking like deep breaths, so, and then like.
And it's still a mystery why a father would kill his 8-month-old bright daughter.
I've said it to him many times. I see a demon in you, in your eyes. Like, you look like a demon to me. But I always wanted to fix that.
Jayden and Rihanna have a daughter, but they're still not together. In fact, Jayden was living with his mom, but he still went over to Rihanna's place from time to time to see Raja. They used to live together back in March 2018, but things started to get really tense between them. Their fights got worse, and by May, Rihanna had enough and told Jayden to leave. Even though he moved out, they kept in touch, and their rocky relationship dragged on. On July 12th, just a day before everything went downhill, Jayden and Raja were staying together at Rihanna's apartment. What was supposed to be a normal day quickly turned into something else. Rihanna somehow found out that Jayden might have been talking to other girls behind her back, and that set off another argument. It wasn't the first time they fought like this, but it sure got heated fast. Jayden got so fed up that he called his mom and begged her to come get him around 11 a.m. That's when things started to spiral. So after that, Tony headed over to pick up Jayden, who was ready to leave. She didn't bring him back to Rihanna's place until midnight that same day. When they got back, Jayden and Rihanna talked for a bit, seemed to patch things up, and then went to bed. The next morning, on July 13th, Rihanna got up around 9 to get ready for work while Jayden and Raja were still asleep. A little later, Rihanna's dad, Arturo Anderson, also showed up to give her a ride to work. Before they left, Jayden and Raja woke up, and Arturo spent some time with Raja, holding her and walking her around. Raja was pretty fussy that morning, but they just thought it was because she was teething. After that, Jayden gave Raja a bath before Tony returned. Jayden and Tony said they left the house with Raja around 11 a.m. and headed to Casey's General Store to grab a pizza. But as it turns out, the security footage showed that Tony didn't actually go into the store until 12:51 p.m. to get the pizza, while Jayden and Raja waited in the car. From there, they drove to Wesley Acres Senior Living, where Rihanna was working. She came out to the car to hand Jayden some food, but didn't stop to say hi to Raja, who was in her car seat. It might seem a little bit strange, but maybe she was just in a rush to get back to work. Afterward, Tony, Jayden, and Raja made another stop at Panchero's Mexican Grill. Tony chatted with a friend there for about 5 minutes, while Jayden and Raja stayed in the car again. Finally, after finishing all their errands, they headed back to Tony's house. So after that, the video shows Jayden bringing little Raja into the house at 2:24 p.m. She's just a baby, and it's sad because right after they walk in, Jayden leaves her alone. You can see him on the footage again at 2:25, but this time Raja isn't with him. A few minutes later, Tony lets Jayden's dog out of its cage so Jayden can play with it outside. It seems like a normal day, just playing with the dog, but there's this unsettling feeling because you know something's not right. Then, at 2:55 p.m., Jayden carries Raja out of the house again. He's holding her, and for a moment, it feels like things might be okay. But in less than a minute, he brings her back inside, only to take her out one more time at 2:56 p.m. This time, he kisses her on the cheek. It's this tiny, tender moment, but it's heartbreaking because we know this is the last time we see Raja before things take a tragic turn. After that, Tony leaves, which means Jayden is alone with Raja. According to Jayden, he started setting off fireworks in the front yard while Raja was still inside, supposedly asleep. However, the home surveillance cameras failed to capture any footage of the fireworks. It's like this part of the story just doesn't add up. Jayden says he ran out of fireworks and went back inside to play on his phone. He's thinking about waking Raja from her nap, so he walks over to where she's been napping in her car seat.
And I called her. She wasn't that far. I called her and said, "Mom, I don't know what's wrong with my baby." She said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I just got her out." And then like she came back, and then like we made it up as soon as we came to the hospital.
When the doctor was talking to you, it sounded like there were some visible injuries on her. Where did those come from? Do you know?
What are you talking about?
And I think you guys were talking about something on the head.
Yeah, like her.
When he gets to her, he realizes something is really wrong. He picks her up, and it hits him like a ton of bricks. Raja isn't responding. She's not moving, not waking up, and the panic sets in fast. Jayden freaks out and calls his mom, begging her to come get them and rush to the hospital. He's terrified, and the clock is ticking.
Okay, have you ever done anything to her that might cause some of the injuries, whether it's pick her up or have her fall out of your lap or anything like that?
I dropped her a couple times when she was younger, but
How long ago was that?
probably a couple months ago.
Okay.
I dropped her while she was little, but
Okay. Nothing recent though or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
Were there any injuries that you were able to observe from dropping?
When she was younger?
Yeah.
His mother, Tony, doesn't waste any time. She races back home, and by 3:46 p.m., Jayden is running out of the house with Raja in his arms. They jump into the car, and they're speeding towards the hospital, trying to save Raja's life. It's chaos, with Jayden and Tony in a desperate race against time. Meanwhile, Rihanna finds out that her baby girl is in the hospital.
And here's a heartbreaking look at a mother's final moments with her daughter. The baby girl in the hospital bed is 8-month-old Jayden Straight. She was dropped off at Mercy Hospital Friday night with serious injuries to her head. On Saturday, she passed away. Then on Sunday, Jayden's dad, Jayden Straight, turned himself into police and was charged with murder.
It's a nightmare for her, too. All their family members are in complete shock, unable to wrap their heads around what's happening. But as we already know, this is when things start to unravel for Jayden. After that, the reality of what had transpired began to sink in. The details of Raja's injuries come out, and they were just horrible. It was clear that this wasn't an accident. The hospital quickly called the police, and because Raja's injuries were so severe, an investigation kicked off right away, and there was one person they were really looking at: Jayden. The detectives wanted to talk to Jayden as soon as possible. They needed to figure out how something so awful could have happened, especially since Raja had been with him all day. The police took Jayden out of the hospital and brought him to the Des Moines police station. Since he was only 17, his mom had to be there too, so she was asked to meet with the detectives and give her okay for them to talk to him. Jayden was clearly upset as they put him in the interrogation room.
The injury had happened in the hours leading up to them showing up at the hospital. Is there anything then that you can think of that might have happened within the last couple of hours before you guys getting to the hospital that could have caused any sort of injury to her that would have changed the dynamic of her body?
He said by the time we going up to the
When the
hospital.
detectives started asking Jayden about what happened on July 13th, things got really tense. They asked about Raja and how she was usually a pretty calm baby, not one to cry much even if she got hurt. but Jayden denied everything. He said he didn't hurt her and claimed she was acting strangely after he came back into the room. But something didn't feel right. The story wasn't adding up. One minute, Raja was supposed to be fine, and the next, she was unconscious. That's how Jayden told it anyway.
You guys think that's for me?
You need to provide a different explanation if it's not from you.
It's not for me.
Okay.
Oh, why would I chase my baby girl?
Because people lose their cool and they do things that are a split second. And if that was the kind of situation, you're right now in a position where you maybe can provide some information that could still be helpful for her. She's in surgery right now.
I know. I did that.
Then, Detective Laurie Kelly came into the picture. She didn't waste any time. She was focused on getting to the bottom of what really happened, and she started pressing Jayden for answers. You could tell this was a turning point, and the story was about to take another big shift.
There is no way that you walked inside and have no clue what happened to her. That is not one of the possibilities. And there is going to be a stream of medical professionals that will come in and say that these injuries are nothing but inflicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so either you lost your cool and you did something you wish you could take back, or you waited until you were alone and beat that baby.
Next, things started getting even more intense. The medical team had already looked over Raja's injuries and rushed her into surgery. The police knew they didn't need Jayden's story to help treat Raja, but they played their cards differently. They told Jayden something that wasn't exactly true, suggesting that any information he gave might help save his daughter. It was a tricky move, a way to pull at his emotions, hoping he might let something slip or even confess.
Information.
The problem we're having is, I've been up at the hospital speaking with the doctors, and your baby has very severe injuries. Severe injuries. Several broken ribs.
What? Ribs are broken?
Yes.
Jayden was already under a lot of pressure, and that statement further shook him. His whole attitude changed. The detective wasn't letting him off the hook either. They made it clear that denying what happened wasn't going to work, and they put the pieces together in a way that made it look like Jayden hadn't called for help because he wanted Raja to die. It was a heavy accusation, and you could feel the tension in the room.
You told me that baby was fine in the morning. A baby who is injured the way that she is injured cannot drink.
What?
Cannot eat.
I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you, to my baby, to the heart. On hood, I didn't do nothing. I did though.
You know exactly what happened to her. And you may be sorry for it. You may be ashamed of what you did. But there is no doubt that you did something to her.
Then, Detective Lancaster decided to talk to Tony alone. They thought maybe they could get more information from her without Jayden being around. But Tony was a mess. She couldn't make up her mind about anything. It was like she was in shock, just going through the motions. Even when the detectives told her about how serious Raja's condition was, she didn't really react the way you'd expect. It seemed strange, as if she was oblivious to the unfolding events.
She got hit hard in the gut. That's what happened to her.
Oh. That's what
The gut or the side. A crushing blow to her abdomen. That's what causes the kinds of injuries that she has. And the symptoms are immediate. And do you know what the symptoms are? The lymphness. How you said she was like a sack of potatoes when we picked her up? That's immediate. So what I'm telling you...
Despite not being much help, Tony agreed to let the detectives question Jayden without her in the room. It was a big step because, as his mom, she was supposed to be there to support him and make sure things were fair. But at this point, she was so confused and overwhelmed that she just went along with whatever they asked. The detectives were closing in, trying to get the truth, while Tony, who should have been his biggest ally, was too shaken to do much. The situation was spiraling, and Jayden was in the middle of it all, facing accusations that could change everything. At this point, Jayden kept insisting that he never hurt his daughter. He stuck to his story, even during a tough interrogation. The detectives weren't buying it, though. They pushed hard, trying to crack him, but Jayden wouldn't budge. After things calmed down a bit, the detective asked Jayden and Tony if they could search their house that day, just to see if there was anything that might help with the investigation. Surprisingly, they both agreed. It seemed like everything was going to move forward smoothly, but then things took a strange turn. Detective Lancaster headed over to Tony's house, expecting to meet Jayden and his mom Tony there. But when he arrived, he noticed that Jayden wasn't with her. That's when Tony told him that she had dropped Jayden off at Mercy Medical Center so he could be with Raja. It sounded reasonable, but this was just the beginning of a tangled web of stories. As it turns out, Jayden never checked into the hospital. The detective, sensing something was off, pressed Tony for more details. That's when she changed her story, saying that she had actually dropped Jayden off on 6th Avenue near the hospital. She claimed she didn't know if he went inside or not. As the detective kept pushing, Tony's story shifted again. She finally admitted that Jayden had asked to get out of the car a couple of blocks from their house. He didn't go to the hospital at all, but where did he go? Tony couldn't or wouldn't say. It was clear that she wasn't being completely honest, and this only added to the growing tension around the case. Finally, the detective got access to the house, and what he found inside was nothing short of chaos. The place was a mess, with stuff scattered all over. It wasn't just a little untidy, it was a disaster. Amidst all the clutter, they found Raja's bottle and her car seat, along with a dirty mattress that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a long time. There was also a video security system, which caught the detective's attention. When asked about the cameras, Tony claimed they didn't work. She insisted she didn't know how to operate them, but the whole situation felt suspicious. The house, the shifting stories, the inoperable cameras. It all added up to something that just didn't sit right with the detective. The search raised more questions than answers, and with Jayden now missing, the case was growing even more complicated. The search didn't bring the clear evidence they needed, but it painted a picture of a family in disarray, with secrets buried just beneath the surface. The mystery of where Jayden went and what really happened to Raja was still hanging in the air, and it seemed like things were only going to get more difficult from here on out. Again, things took another strange turn. When the detectives reviewed the recordings from July 13th, they realized there was more to the story than Jayden and Tony were letting on. The footage didn't match up with what they'd been told. They also found live fireworks sitting right on the front porch, even though Jayden had claimed he'd used them all up. This discovery made it clear that Jayden wasn't being truthful, and it only deepened the investigators' suspicions. As they left the house, law enforcement became even more determined to find Jayden. They were worried he might have run away, trying to escape whatever consequences were coming. There was also the fear that he might have been in contact with his mom Tony during the time, which would complicate things even further. The police started to doubt both Tony and Jayden more and more, especially as the story kept getting murkier with each new piece of information. When they finally sat down to talk with Rihanna, Jayden's girlfriend, and Raja's mom, their suspicions reached a whole new level. Rihanna shared some things that made the situation even more troubling. She mentioned that she'd seen Jayden being rough with Raja before. According to her, Jayden had been showing signs of impatience or frustration with the baby, and that was a serious concern. Rihanna also talked about her uneasy relationship with Tony, Jayden's mom. She said Tony had always been a bit strange towards her, especially since she got pregnant. According to Rihanna, Tony was distant, almost forcing herself to talk to her. Rihanna found it weird that Tony didn't show any emotion, even in such a tense situation. It was like Tony was just sitting there, thinking to herself, with no visible reaction to what was happening around her. Rihanna felt like Tony was struggling with something internally, maybe questioning what she had done or what she had allowed to happen. It seemed like Tony was lost in her own thoughts, detached from the reality of the situation. Rihanna even recalled a time when she was out shopping and found Jayden outside crying by himself. It was clear that there were a lot of unspoken tensions and emotions in this family, and it all added up to something very unsettling. As detectives pieced together Rihanna's account with what they already knew, the investigators felt the weight of the situation growing heavier. There was still so much they didn't understand, but one thing was becoming clear. This wasn't just a simple case of a tragic accident. Something much darker was at play, and they were determined to get to the bottom of it, no matter how long it took. Rihanna opened up a bit more about the darker side of Jayden, even though it clearly made her uneasy. She talked about how Jayden had a short temper, something that was no secret to those close to him. There were rumors that he'd been involved in gang activity, and that's what eventually landed him in a juvenile detention center. He was in there around the time Raja was born, which only made things more complicated. Rihanna also mentioned how Jayden's anger often spilled over into their relationship. They had their share of fights, and there was even a time when Jayden allegedly hit her during one of their arguments. It wasn't just the violence that caused problems between the families, though. The real breaking point came when Rihanna found out that Jayden had been unfaithful while she was pregnant with Raja. That betrayal cut deep, and it set the stage for the tense situation they were all now in.
I've never seen with my own eyes him hurt her. There's been times where I feel like, Jayden, you're being too rough. And I'm like, we can't be that rough with her.
Jayden also disappeared. Nobody knew where he went, and for a while, it looked like he might be on the run. But that didn't last long. On July 14th, the story took another twist. At around 12:30 in the afternoon, Detective Lancaster got a call from Tony's phone. But it wasn't Tony on the other end, it was Jayden. Somehow, he had gotten hold of the phone and was using it to reach out. He told the detective that he would call back after his sister's dance practice and that they could arrange a time to meet later that day. But, as you might expect, Jayden never followed through with that promise. By this point, the police were in full pursuit. The search for Jayden kicked into high gear, and they were determined to find him. It didn't take long before another officer managed to get in touch with him. After spending the last day and a half trying to locate him for another interview, Jayden finally agreed to come in. Early in the morning on July 15th, at about 2 a.m., Jayden walked into the interrogation room with her mother, Tony. During the interrogation, things got even more intense. The detectives started telling Jayden that they needed to discuss some of the new information they had gathered. Tony called Jayden's father, Jayden Straight, so he could listen in on the interrogation. Before they began, the police made sure Jayden knew his rights. They read him his Miranda rights and told him that he didn't have to talk without a lawyer present. But Jayden and his parents agreed to go ahead with the conversation anyway. Then, the detective dropped the bombshell. He told Jayden, "At 7:51 today, your daughter passed away. There was no brain activity. She was only alive because of the machines, and they discontinued any forms of life support." That moment hit hard. The reality of what had happened finally sank in for Jayden, Tony, and everyone involved. It was a crushing blow, and it changed the course of the investigation from that point forward. The story had taken a tragic turn, and now it was no longer just about finding out what happened. It was about dealing with the loss of a little girl who didn't even have a chance at life. After all that, the weight of what was happening finally came crashing down on Jayden. The detectives told him straight up that they had been in contact with the Polk County Attorney's Office and the judges in their county. They explained that the charges had been approved and Jayden was going to face some serious consequences. He was told that he would be charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment resulting in death, both of which are heavy felony charges. In addition, Jayden was going to be charged as an adult, even though he was just 17 at the time.
is what I've been doing is I've been talking to the Polk County Attorney's Office and judges that are in Polk County, which is the county that we live in, and they have approved charges against you for the death of your daughter. Okay? Today, you are going to be charged with murder in the first degree and child endangerment resulting in death. Okay? Both of those are felonies, and you will be charged as an adult.
It was at that moment that Jayden was officially placed under arrest. This wasn't just another case. It was one of the most shocking crimes the country had ever seen. But things got even darker when the doctors revealed their findings. They discovered that Raja's rib fractures were consistent with something called shaken baby syndrome. This was a brutal injury that couldn't have been an accident. The doctors made it clear that Jayden was not only responsible for his daughter's death, but this was a deliberate attack. The realization that Raja's death wasn't an accident hit hard. It became clear that Jayden never intended for his daughter to survive that fateful day. When the medical staff asked him what happened to Raja, he simply said that he didn't know. But
If any of the injuries were intentionally caused to her, who would have done it?
I don't really know.
Who do you think?
I don't know, I don't know who, I really know.
everyone knew that wasn't the truth. The evidence painted a grim picture, one that pointed directly to Jayden as the person who had taken his own daughter's life. In 2019, Jayden pleaded guilty to second-degree murder along with several other charges. The court didn't hold back when it came to his sentence. He was handed a 100-year prison term, a punishment that reflected the severity of his actions.
Tonight, a man is sentenced to a century in prison for the death of his 8-month-old daughter. Jayden Straight pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and other charges in an agreement with prosecutors Friday. 8-month-old Raja Straight died in the summer of 2018 from multiple skull fractures, broken ribs, and other injuries. Doctors say that's a result of a deliberate assault. Straight received the maximum sentence for each of the 6 charges he pleaded guilty to. That totals to 100 years in prison.
But even with the case closed and Jayden behind bars, one haunting question remained unanswered. Why? Why would a father so viciously take the life of his own child? The motive behind such a horrific act is something that might never be fully understood. It leaves a void, a lingering question that haunts everyone who hears about the case. People might speculate, but the truth is, only Jayden knows why he did what he did. And that's a secret he may take to his grave.